a lot of people tend to be led to their football passions because of a parent or, I was an oldest child and I had a dad who could care less about sports. So I kind of was that pioneer going on a Michigan, Oregon trail of my own. And I discovered, Michigan State. Though I appreciate Michigan State, there was such a rich history with Michigan as a teenager. I started, and I remember, of course, back in the Rose Bowl and at the end of 89 or at the end of 88 leading into 89. That was just such a kind of watermark moment in my life because I just said, there's something amazing here. There's something about tradition and all that. But I think with Michigan, I kind of run into a lot of little brick walls with fellow Michigan fans because I think there are two divisions of Michigan fandom. I think there is the minority, which is we were once great. We once, when you think of Schembechler versus Hayes, we once were worthy of being a contender, of being on the same grass as Ohio State. But we haven't been doing that in years. Not since Hoke, even since Harbaugh. And I want to rebuild, like a lot of us do, a team in an honest way without the hubris, without the over inflated ego that has blinded us because your ego on letting your past legacy. I mean, I've never seen that. If your grandfather laid down great concrete to some of the biggest skyscrapers, but you just kind of do a half-hearted job at it, there's flaws in the foundation and all that. You can't just say, well, hey, I'm riding on my grandfather's legacy. He was great. He was the best. You're not doing the best. That legacy only gets you so far. And the thing is, I think that part of us, that part of the Michigan crowd, we recognize this is a meritocracy first and foremost. It really is. What have you done lately? And I think, like, for example, like Don Brown. Okay, first of all, I have nothing against him. He's a great, great man. He really is a good guy. They would always say, oh, that awesome Don Brown defense, that legendary Don Brown defense. Well, if you look lately, the only time that magical Don Brown defense worked were against teams that were not even really level with Michigan or Ohio State. Okay. You didn't see that magic on a day we were playing OSU. All right. So you have that. I think with Harbaugh, it was like you're going on a date, you meet that person who's perfect, has so much great things, but they're just not right for you. And I think we've proved that with Harbaugh. I think he's a great person who's mismatched. It happens all the time. We had a golden opportunity to go for a rebuild. They got rid of Don Brown. Then they decided to extend this contract. So, and I don't know if he's on some kind of journey to redeem himself by saying, hey, I'm going to take this pay cut. I'm going to earn it back by turning this around. But the thing is, you're not going to turn it around if you're doing the same things you've always done. And the problem is there's not a consistency to what's being done. I'll give you a couple examples, Mark. This is where the ego trips in. A couple of years ago when John Corn stepped down and they put Brandon Peters in, he all of a sudden was the second coming of Christ after one half okay game. Oh, wow, he's amazing. Harbaugh, we couldn't just shut up about him. Oh, the great Brandon, already, he was being patterned into the Hall of Fame, and he was already winning his Heisman after one game, in his opinion. That's where the ego came in, where he had an okay first game. But you notice it really didn't turn into much after that. They did it with Patterson. Now we saw that with Milton. If you remember that first game of the season, Milton, all of a sudden, the Messiah had come again. Michigan, we are back to Schembechler era football. So the part of us that represent that realistic side of Michigan said, hold on, you had a good game. Let's see where this goes. And then we get mystified. We scratch our heads, go, wait, why didn't this magic happen in week 2? Why didn't it happen in week 3? Well, gee, maybe it's because we're not realistic. And I'm sorry, but we haven't played OSU level football in a long time. It's like if you're an alcoholic, you have to admit you're an alcoholic. You're not going to attain sobriety without an admission of where you're at. Doesn't mean negativity. It means realism. The Lions, I don't know if you follow much of the pros, Mark, but they are going through a rebuild that they've never done before. They have done a house cleaning of the ages, and it kind of gives us a little glimmer of hope what's going on. I wish Michigan did that, but they're not totally willing to admit They act like, oh, we're still that great team. We just have a couple components that aren't quite in place yet. And I'm like, no, we don't have an OSU level team. So the other 80% of Michigan fans, they're illuminated by the blue and maize. It's a trance. We are still amazing. We're getting killed here, but we're still amazing. And Michigan's one of those teams that does that. And I don't see it in a lot of other teams. A lot of other teams are pretty more accurate about where they're at. And that's just from where I'm coming from. There's a mirage in the Ann Arbor desert going on, and people are falling for it.
So I'm guessing that when Jim Harbaugh was hired, you were excited, because I know as an Ohio State fan and just as a college football analyst, I thought it was the perfect fit because, as you mentioned, sometimes there is a perfect fit that seems to be obvious, but in practicality, in actuality, it turns out not to be the case. But as a Michigan man, as a guy who mentored under the great Bo Schembechler, as a quarterback, as a player who had resurrected all these other programs along the way, both at the college stops, most notably Stanford, and then with San Francisco 49ers, seemed to be the perfect fix for this program.
Well, I'll tell you what, when the news first broke that he was coming, of course, where Hoke was leading us, nothing against Brady Hoke as a person, but where he was leading us was a very dark place. Okay. But still, even the realistic base of ours, we were ecstatic, but we also realized that the offense was so bad at that time. Defense was actually pretty good. The offense was so bad at the time. I said, even though Harbaugh's in, it's not a reason to break out the champagne and sing happy days are here again just yet. Even with the best coaches, rebuilds are still a big part of it. There had to be some rebuilding going on. And a lot of Michigan fans, I think it was more of just the wave of the wand. It was just going, no, I knew it wasn't. That's why none of us were really getting upset about it overnight, because these things take time. And I think Harbaugh is amazingly talented. I just don't know where the disconnect is, though. And I can't even pretend to know where the disconnect is. Some people say, oh, maybe he's investing too much in his weird recruiting things, taking people to Zimbabwe, all the students or whatever, or, these little trips that they do. I'm sure those enrich them and give them a good cultural view of the world, and it's a memorable thing. It really hasn't, to me, led to team success, though, that I would like to see. So, yeah, I mean, Harbaugh, there was every reason to do that, but there's just something that's not right. And I think we're all scratching our heads wondering, where does the disconnect lie? Because is it with certain things he's doing? Is it his inconsistency? The talent is there. The potential is there. It's kinetic energy at this point. I just don't know how to make use of it in the best way. I was thinking maybe good for a fresh start, but they decided to let him, continue to rule. And I just hope he has different people whispering in his ear this time. And, you got to change some things, because if we just do what we've always done, we're going to get what we've always gotten. So
I'm going to let him off the hook just in this one way. And I've stated this before, that if you look at each one of us in the selected career field, vocation that we operate, most likely we're able to be a success without having to compete and excel at the highest level. We're able to be competent, capable at what we do, and we're not measured against some ridiculous standard. Now, on the flip side, he is being paid as such very handsomely, way beyond what any of us can imagine being paid to reach that standard and eclipse that standard. And maybe it's just a situation in which he is up against one of the top 3 programs in the country. If you look at what he has achieved since he got to Michigan, he took over a program that was struggling, but still had acquired talent under Brady Hoke and had a really good season in 2011 at 11-2, won the Sugar Bowl. 2012, I thought they were the best 8-5 team in the country. They lost to 5 of the best teams in the country by 1 score. They were really good. And then here we are a couple of years later. Jim Harbaugh takes over a 5-7 team that was better than 5-7, and boom, he turns it on a dime. They go 10-3, finish in the top 10 in the country, beat Florida in a bowl game, and I thought they were off and running. The 2016 version was the one team that actually outplayed Ohio State on the field. They were the better team on the field in Columbus that day, and had things broken a different way, whether that was a play made by Ohio State or not made by Michigan or not correctly made by the officials, we could debate all night, but they left as a loser. Had they won that game, they were marching on to Indianapolis in the Big Ten championship and a likely win over Wisconsin in a Big Ten championship and college football playoff appearance. And who knows, as we know, what happens where there's a crossroad for a team, a program, an individual. And that might have been it right there.
Well, yeah, first of all, I mean, when I say that, disappointed that they kept Harbaugh or anything, first of all, it's no disrespect toward him. He is one of the most immense talents out there. I really like him. He has a good family. He's a great guy. Okay. He's mega talented. And you're right. He did have that great season after Hoke and all that. I kind of related to the Matthew Stafford thing we had going on. Matthew Stafford was great, but the Lions were not facilitating his greatness. They were not making it so he could thrive. If, like, you ever look at the Lions, the offensive linemen were just not protecting Stafford, so he didn't really get a chance to execute the best of his abilities. So I don't know if, like I said before, I'm not sure where the wiring's off, because you have the talent there. Harbaugh is capable of bringing them to the championship. He has those goods. I don't know if it's within the inner dynamics of the organization, but there is a disconnect there that everybody's cognizant of. We just don't know what it is. Because I don't think it lies in really Harbaugh even. I think he's amazing, but I don't know if his arm is being held behind his back at a certain point or what, but it just hasn't been happening the last couple of years. And I thought maybe if they went to another team where his talent maybe would work better, he would probably lead that team. It happens sometimes. You go to another team and all of a sudden you're just busting out and you're just living your full potential. But I don't think it's like, I'm not part of the hate Harbaugh camp or anything like that either. Like you, I try to do analysis. I don't get emotional about it. I'm not into smearing people's personality or maligning them or anything like that.
And for as much as I am into the analysis, I'm into the tangible analysis. I try not to get into the hearts and minds of individuals to determine motivations and incentives and levels of engagement or investment and those sorts of things, unless there are tangible results or tangible displays of behavior that they can be traced and tracked and trend. Otherwise, I'm working with factual data and the performance on the field to try to determine and evaluate performance of coaches and players and teams and programs. But with Harbaugh, I just have to think that, okay, that was letdown number one, that 2016 game with Ohio State, but that could have fueled a program, okay, because it's not like they were knocking on the door forever and couldn't get through. This was really their first time in a long time that, okay, they're as good as Ohio State. They didn't get it done, but hey, we're building this thing. This should be even more incentive and motivation to, hey, we've caught them. In terms of talent, recruiting, everything involved, we've caught them. Now we just need to get it done on the field. But the game that might have really just been the punch in the gut was the 2018 game 2 years later in Columbus, which the teams arrived at the Horseshoe with the same exact record. But as I outlined, Michigan performed so much better than Ohio State over the course of those 11 games and arriving at 10-1. They had 5 like opponents, and there was no way not to think that Michigan wasn't the better team, because they had performed in dominant fashion against teams that Ohio State continually struggled against. And then they step on the same field, and Ohio State just takes them to the cleaners. And that seemed to be the watershed game of this series under Harbaugh.
Yeah, I don't know what this is, Mark, but I'm going to tell you what, if you ever come to Michigan, every team in Michigan, we call it this Michigan implosion theory, that, like, you see in the Lions a lot. They will play, they'll be leading, they'll be doing that. There's this tendency at the end to just screw up. We implode near the end. Almost every team we have, whether it's baseball, basketball, hockey, or football, we tend to see a dynamic, and we don't know if it's attached to Michigan, something in the water. I don't know. But of course, you being a hard analysis man, you're looking at the numbers, and it can be perplexing, especially that year that you mentioned. It is. And, but you know what? I think, Michigan fans, what we need to do is we need to say, this is what we have to play with right now. We need to be behind Jim Harbaugh the best we can, hope for the best. But we know that they got to make a change. But I will say this, though, maybe the cut in salary and all that might, and again, this is me getting into his head, so I'll leave that to me. But maybe that will be the thing, though, that kind of lifts him into the stratosphere and say, hey, I could prove this to myself because I'm fighting for something. I'm fighting for my reputation. I'm fighting for the salary that I wasn't getting before, the portion of it. I do think there is a Rocky Balboa kind of thing to go up those steps at the Philadelphia Art Museum and just say, gonna fly now with his hands up in the air. And if that's what drives him, that's great. But you need drive, and you also need to retool and examine thoroughly where we went wrong, what has to be done. I don't know if getting rid of Don Brown is going to be the be all end all, and all of a sudden things are going to be beautiful. They thought Shea Patterson was going to be a messiah figure, Brandon, Peters, all of them. And I think there's obviously a strain there that's just not there. No matter what new talent we brought in, there's still that strain there. And I think it has to be dealt with before we can all move on. Now, what is that strain? I have no idea, but it's there. It's almost palpable.
Regardless, Michigan fans still maintain interest in their program. There's no question about that.
Oh, yeah.
When I post Michigan videos, they typically explode.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's what actually, even during the Brady Hoke years, we still sold out at the Big House. It's an extremely loyal base, which can be, both beneficial and problematic at the same time, because problematic, it's something about, I'm going to love you no matter what you do. Like, well, no, sometimes when you have those fair weather fans, when you realize you could lose revenue and all that if you're not doing so hot, there's kind of a little impetus for you to try to drive up your game a little bit. So I think that ultra loyalty can go malignant if it becomes too blind faith, and but it is a very loyal fan base. We stick together, but I love it when Michigan fans, though, say OSU, they just, they're not any good. We'll kill them next year. And I'm like, no, let's be realistic. They're one of the best programs in the country. Hands down. Alabama, of course. A little, but I'm talking like in the Big Ten, around the Midwest and all that. There's nothing like Ohio State. And they deserve every bit of credit they get.
So before we let you go, and you've been so kind to give us your time tonight, do you have a favorite all-time Michigan player?
Oh, gosh, that's hard. Oh, my gosh. Devin Gardner. No, I'm joking. No. Of course, Harmon. But that's going way back in the history books for a lot of people. You, of course, probably know who he is.
Yes.
One of the greats. His songs are, people still sing songs of his glory to this day in Michigan, and will always have such a monumental impact. Believe it or not, a lot of people assume because we had Brady, people weren't ecstatic about him when he played college. No one hated him or anything, but no one saw the writing on the wall with where he was going to go in life at the time. So people now kind of pay in retrospect, oh, you had Brady. That must have been awesome. And I'm like, I didn't hate him. I didn't love him either at the time. I thought he was functional. He did his job, but he wasn't even he didn't have the notoriety when he was in Michigan that he went with the pros. And so, of course, Harmon. I'm sorry. I got to go with the classics on that one.
Good stuff. He is the Reactioneer. Let me pull up his banner right here because I want to make sure that everybody knows to put this into the search bar on YouTube, and you can go right directly to his channel and check out the musical journey that he takes all of us on each and every time. And if you've caught one, then you know what I'm talking about. And once you do, then don't blame me if you're hooked. I warned you.
Mark, I want to thank you so much for having me on here. Like I said, I'm a big fan. You're kind of like the soundtrack to my life, because whenever I'm doing stuff, I work a lot at my desk editing. Guess what's usually playing in the background if it's not music? It's the voice of college football, a voice I'm all too familiar with, and a voice that I'm very fortunate to know because my football knowledge base has grown exponentially since then. And I think it's just one of the best things happening on the internet, the best with college football, definitely. Thank you so much.